Thank you for being here tonight. We are in the second chapter of Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy chapter 2. It's been several years ago that I saw this article. But in the article there was the statement made that a lot of people who are lost have some complaints about Christians. So it kind of piqued my interest, and I read through it, and it said, and I don't know if this was a scientific poll, this was just something that was very informal, but it said that one of the top complaints, the first one mentioned by this individual in the article, so I don't know if it's number one on the poll or just first one he mentioned, was that many Christian people tend to be self-righteous. And it kind of made me think about, how do we come across to lost people? If they are complaining about us, what would be their biggest complaint? And I guess that depends on who you're asking. But I do believe that probably there's some truth that many Christians come across as self-righteous. We're going to look at a verse of Scripture tonight that kind of reminds us of our responsibilities to lost people and how we treat them. Our responsibility to lost people is to share with them, obviously, the gospel of Christ and what Christ means to us. But in that, we are also to share with them the things that are characteristic of Jesus Christ. And by that I mean that we are to share with them the persona, the character in our life that reflects to them the reality of who Jesus is. And Moses is speaking to the Israelites about God's direction and leading them to the land that God is going to take them. And he speaks of the route that God is going to take them through the possession of the children of Esau. Now, you have to remember the issue of Esau with his brother. Of course, you remember that, and how at one time Esau seemed to have the upper hand. But then Esau didn't have the upper hand. And what Moses is saying here is that you're going to pass through the possession of the children of Esau. In verse 4, he says, watch yourself. Let's go. We're going to look at verse 5, but notice he says the last part of verse 5, and they, speaking of the children of Esau, shall be afraid of you. They shall be afraid of you. Doesn't say they shall be afraid of your God or this, that, and the other. He says they shall be afraid of you. Notice the next statement. Take ye good heed unto yourselves, therefore. Now, connect those two things. You're going to pass through basically the coast of the possession of the children of Esau. And he says, they're going to be afraid of you. He says, now you're going to need to be very careful and watch yourself how you conduct yourself. Take good heed to yourselves because they're going to be afraid of you. We're going to come back and talk about that in just a moment. Now look at verse 5. Meddle not with them, for I will not give you of their land, no, not so much as a foot breadth. Now, notice in those words some things about this issue of watching themselves. Watch yourselves. It's incumbent. I can't say that word. Incumbent. Thank you. It is incumbent that we as God's people take good heed unto ourselves. Now there's a lot of ways we need to do that. We need to take good heed to ourselves as it relates to our relationship with God. We need to take good heed to ourselves in relationship to our responsibilities for God in the church, and on we can go. But in this context, we need to take good heed unto ourselves in how we conduct ourselves toward other people, particularly the lost people. And in these words, watch yourself, take good heed, watch yourselves. In verse 4, he means you need to guard yourself correctly. Guard yourselves correctly. There is a way that you need to guard yourself as you relate to the lost world. There are ways that you may guard yourself, look to yourself, and maybe they aren't the best, but take good heed unto yourselves. Take the right guarding and take personal responsibilities. Just because we are saved people doesn't mean that we have no responsibilities toward lost people in the way we conduct ourselves. We have quite a bit. Years ago, I had a good friend that lived with me at Marlow when I went to seminary. He was not a preacher. His name was Harold Acuff. And Harold moved to Marlow, and I needed a roommate, and he joined our church, came, and we became good friends. And he had on the back of his car that bumper sticker that says, "Christians aren't perfect, they're just forgiven." And a good little bumper sticker. But Harold liked to drive fast. And oftentimes, if he was driving and I was in the passenger seat, he would drive, and he would drive between cars, and I mean, he scared me a lot of times. And we laughed some about that bumper sticker. He said, "Can you imagine the way I drive and people see that?" And I said, "Yeah, it might not be the best testimony." We have a personal responsibility to how we treat people. One of the first emails I ever received when I started getting online, doing all the stuff that we now do, one of the first emails that I ever received was from someone I did not know about a pastor I knew, and how this person claimed that that preacher took their mother and dad for all the money they had and just really took everything they had and just was very critical. And I don't know if it was true or not, but just because we are Christian people, just because we know the Lord, doesn't mean we don't have responsibilities toward other people. And in these words of Moses, there is a sense of how to properly conduct ourselves as the Lord's people. Now, in verse 4, when Moses says that they shall be afraid of you, why is he telling them that? He's telling them that so that they don't abuse their position and power as they go through the land of the children of Esau. Moses is saying that because he says you're not to abuse the way in which the Lord leads you. You need to watch yourself, especially when you know the children of Esau are afraid of you. I'm not going to ask you this, but do you ever think when you know you have a little power over people some way, somehow, and it may not be power just by your position in authority or your position in a place of employment, it may just be your power that you have because of how somebody thinks towards you. They may hold you in such high esteem that you recognize that they think you hung the moon, and it's very easy for you to take advantage of that. You may have people that are intimidated by you. They may feel intimidated by you And if you know that, if you're not careful, and you don't take good heed to yourself, you may abuse that position. Moses said, you're going to go through the possession of the children of Esau. He says they're going to be afraid of you, but you got to take good heed to yourselves because of that, the word therefore. So the Lord's people are not to abuse the way in which the Lord leads us. There's a lot of examples, and we don't have time tonight, about how it's possible that the Lord's people can abuse our positions. For instance, and I've talked about this in other aspects, but in the book of Corinthians, Paul talks about the eating of meats and how there were those who were saved who could eat meat and it didn't bother them. But there were others, and we're talking about Christian on Christian here, but there were other Christians who were new to the faith, who had come out of a lifestyle of idolatry before they were saved, and when they saw those who were older Christians or Christians from a different perspective, as far as they didn't have any idol worship and such as that, they ate meat and they became offended. And Paul wrote to the Corinthians, he said, if it's offensive to your brother, don't eat meat, because you don't need to abuse your liberty. And Paul talks in the book of Galatians about the abuse of our liberty. It's very easy for us to abuse the spiritual freedom, the spiritual place, the spiritual life that God has given to us, and abuse it even in regard to other people. So Paul says, don't do it. Don't do it. Think about the Lord himself. I like to go back to Christ on a lot of things because he is our example, but he's also who we are pursuing as far as our lifestyle. We want to be like Christ. Well, think about Christ and how he did not abuse his position, how selfless he was. When Paul said, or when Moses says to the Israelites, he says, they're going to be afraid of you, the children of Esau are, and when you go through their land, he says, what? It's not them, but you watch you. You be very careful that you don't abuse the reality that they're afraid of you, because you could, when somebody's afraid of you, you can hold it over them. When somebody's afraid of you, you can take whatever is theirs. You can really abuse that. And Paul said, or Moses says, don't do that. Christ didn't do it. Think about many others in the Bible who gave up the advantages that they had over other people. Sometimes as children of God in our life, in situations, we get into a position that if we so choose, we can abuse our position as God's people. We can abuse our position as followers of Christ, and we are reminded here, never abuse it. Israel would be coming from the children of Esau's weak side. Moses says they will be afraid. Be careful. Be careful. You have to be very sensitive and not be abusive. Sometimes we abuse what God gives us and opportunities we don't even recognize it. We were in a situation one time with a relative of Deidre's who is saved but hadn't been in church. And the church had gotten a new pastor where this relative was a member at. And the new pastor, in his zeal, in his excitement, in his desire to get that guy back in church, started talking to him and really getting on him about coming to church in the company of several of us in the family. And you could almost feel, as they say, cut the tension with a knife. You could almost do that. Deidre and I talked about it. Knowing the relative like we do, we said, do you think that did more harm than it did good? We do that sometimes unintentionally. There may be somebody that you want to come to Christ. And that's a very important thing. And there may be somebody that you want to come to Christ, and you talk to them, and that's a very rightful thing to do. But you have to be very attentive, very mindful of how you do that. I've seen, and I've done it myself, trying to get people in church and all that, and it just wasn't the right time. It wasn't the right setting. Maybe we did more harm than we did good. Moses says, they're going to be afraid. You're going to be in a position where you can just about do whatever you want to them. He says, but the problem isn't them, it's you. Watch yourself. Don't abuse your opportunities. Don't abuse your positions. And sometimes we just need to be reminded the same within ourselves. Now, going back to verse 5, not only the abuse issue, but agitation. He says, meddle not with them. And the word meddle means to not get stirred up. Not get stirred up. A lot of times as Christian people, it's very easy for us to get stirred up, get agitated. And sometimes we do a great sense of damage when we get agitated. It's very easy to do, understand. But this is why he says, watch yourselves. And the way you conduct yourself, whether you are at work, in your family, whatever it is, he says, meddle not with him. Don't get yourself excited. He's not talking about the children of Esau. He's talking about them. He says, you don't even start it. Don't even get involved in it. Because when you do, you may annoy them, injure them, hurt them. And then what good do you do? Too few of us as Christian people pay attention to how we are to other people. Too few of us pay enough attention to how we are to other people, and especially to the lost. Especially to lost people. And I don't mean by this that we are not to teach the Bible or stand for the truth. I don't mean that at all. But sometimes it's the manner in which we do it. Sometimes it's how we do it. And when Moses says here, meddle not with them, he says, don't agitate them and don't get involved with them. Just keep moving. Just keep moving. I'm taking you where you need to be. This is not, their land's not where you need to be. We'll talk about that in just a moment. So don't get sidetracked. And don't start meddling with what they are and where they are. Just keep moving. You know, there's a powerful thing that Jesus taught us when he said that, you know, if a man strike you on the cheek, you turn the other cheek. We do a lot of joking about that. We do a lot of talking about that kind of thing. But and there's times when you have to stand and be bold on things, but understand that really the first thing we need to do is to not meddle with people. Don't get involved in their strife. Don't get involved in the agitation, and don't agitate it worse by getting involved in it. If you've ever been in a family squabble, and most of our families are probably like this in some way at some point. Somebody's this way. That there's two of you having an issue. And one of you, it may be you, I don't know, one of you put somebody else in it, and that other person is a person you know sure doesn't need to get involved and meddle in your issue. Because then it's just going to get worse. He says, meddle not with them. Take heed to yourself. Know how to conduct yourself as you pass through. They're going to be afraid of you. They're going to be afraid of you, and you're going to have the opportunity because of that fear to kind of put yourself, lord over them, and put yourself in a position where you can stir things up. But that's not your business. That's not your business. So he says, move on. We need to learn from this that we do not gain and should not engage with other people in that respect. And this, it kind of goes back to this. I thought about this when I looked at verse 5 when he says, meddle not with them. Don't get stirred up, agitated, don't get involved in them. And it kind of came to me that the Bible speaks of you and I as being pilgrims, strangers, sojourners. And that's probably a term or a thought that we don't keep in our head enough. We're not companions to this world, and we're not building homes in this world. We're living in tents and picking those tents up every day, moving closer to our home with the Lord. And we need to carry on that. We like to say a lot of times in our songs, and it's true, this world is not my home. I'm just a passing through. But that means not only are we not to settle into a world where there is little materialism that's lasting, where there's little joy that's fulfilling, and we're just moving past. We need to hold on to that. But we also need to watch ourselves and realize that there are some things in who we are and what we are as God's people that are bigger than getting mixed up in where other people are and what they've got going on. Meddle not with them. We are pilgrims, and we need to pass through. And I think this is very important. We need to have the mindset that we are passing through this life in order to properly influence the unsaved around us that we encounter. The last thing is we need to watch our appropriation. What we hold to. Notice what he says. He says, I will not give you of their land not so much as a foot breadth. He says, I will not, God says, I will not give you even of one little foot of their land. So don't part there. Don't get involved with them. Don't stir them up. Don't lord over them because they're afraid. Just keep moving. Just keep moving. Because their land's not your land. What they have is not what you have. So he says, don't, and this is very important, I think, do not take what God does not give. And it's true in any capacity, in any sense. Do not take what God does not give. If God tells you you're a pilgrim and you're moving through and nothing here is yours, then move on through. And do the best influencing you can by moving through. If you read verse 6, and I'm not going to read it, but if you read verse 6, Moses says that God says you're going to buy meat from them to eat. You're going to buy water from them. And if you look at verse 6, he says you're going to give them money for everything. Why? Because then there'll be nothing said. There'll be nothing said. It'll all be up front. There's been a lot of preachers who have done a lot of damage for the Lord's word because how they expected people to give to them. I'll never forget when I was in a kid, and I probably told you this story, but my mother had her donut shop, and there was an elderly man and woman came in one day, and they bought a donut and a cup of coffee each, and came to 30 cents or something. It was, real cheap, because that's been a few years ago too. But the woman was paying me, and she said, do you give pastors discounts? I never heard of a pastor discount. I said, I don't know. I turned around to my mom. She was back in the kitchen. I said, Mom, do we give preacher discounts? And she said, what? So she come on to the front. The woman asked her, she said, do you give preacher discounts? And she said, no, I don't guess. She said, I never heard of it. She said, well, we do a lot of going places. She said, I always ask everybody if you give a preacher a discount. And my mother said, ma'am, my husband's a preacher. And she said, we've never done that. And my mother said, after she left, she said, She said, well, I never would dream that you'd ask for a preacher discount. And it's going to be maybe 5 cents. Of course, back in the 70s, maybe 5 cents was big money. I don't know. But, you know, but I mean, here we are. My mom's pastor's wife, preacher's kid. And we began to think, and I won't say we thought, boy, they have a lot of gall. We didn't do that. But we were kind of disappointed that you would be going around looking for every little thing you can get. Well, as Christians sometimes, we kind of slow up our pilgrimage if we get stuck in trying to get as far ahead as we can, get what we can, and such as that. We have a tendency sometimes in the way that we live as if we believe that we're not passing through, rather we're living here. And God said, I'm not giving you 1 foot breadth. You're not even getting the little bit. So we need to learn, as God's people, do not take what God does not give. And those of us who will, if we will, appropriate God's word and His leadership to ourselves, will always end up better if we remain pilgrims in mind. If we appropriate to ourselves what God gives to us and continue to be pilgrims, we will always end up better than we would have if we stopped along the way and started camping out, not in a tent, but at building a house maybe, where a place where we're not even at. And you see, this is not who we are. This world has nothing for us. It doesn't have anything for us. So why even if we, no matter how other people feel about us, and no matter how other people may agitate us, if we just keep going where God leads, then we'll always end up better than we would have if we'd stayed and built our house where the world does. And if you look at verses 6 and 7, God said to them, He said, if you need food to eat, which you'll need, if you need water, which you'll need as you pass through, pay for it. Because once you get out of there, you need to leave the land that the children of Esau have, so that they will know that you conducted yourself correctly. You didn't lord over them in their fear, and you didn't try to intimidate them worse, and you didn't do things to them that you shouldn't do. They were afraid of you, but you didn't do anything. And because you didn't do anything, they respect you. And you passed through, and you didn't stir them up, and so when you leave, they're going to respect you. And when you pass through, and you paid for what you took, then when you left, they respected you. Now, we want everyone around us to come to know Christ. We want everyone around us to come to know Christ. But we can't, that's not our control. That's between them and God. But one thing is important for us. One thing is incumbent for us. And that is the lives that we touch, the people that we encounter once we leave them. If they do not come to know Christ, at least they should have a sense of respect for those of us who name the name of Christ because of the way we dealt with them. Then we need to remember verse 7. I will read this. For the Lord thy God hath blessed thee in all the works of thy hand. He knoweth thy walking through this great wilderness these 40 years. The Lord thy God hath been with thee. Thou hast lacked nothing. We need to go forward as God has led us in the past. And I like the way Moses says the Lord is known. Every step you've taken through the wilderness, and you've lacked nothing. So go forward. Don't stop here where the children of Esau dwell. You go forward and see what God has for you in the future. And that should be our my